High Council member Zixtal pressed his tentacles against the viewing screen in horror, his chromatophores flashing a sickly shade of green-gray that reflected his mounting distress. Before him, the surveillance footage from Earth continued to play, each frame more disturbing than the last. "By the sacred spores," he whispered, his voice trembling. They're eating them." The gathered members of the Galactic Research Council shifted uncomfortably in their hover pods, their own color patterns ranging from shocked white to nauseated purple. On the screen, a human family sat around what they called a dinner table, cheerfully consuming what the Council's xenobiologists had confirmed to be Carcharodon carcharias, the great white shark, Earth's most feared oceanic predator. "How?" demanded Council member Vripat, her crystalline appendages clinking together nervously. "How are they so casual about it? That creature has dominated their oceans for millions of years. It's at the very top of their marine food chain." The Council's chief Earth specialist, Dr. Maktal, cleared his throat sacs. "That's not even the worst of it," he said, manipulating the controls to show different footage. "They have entire restaurants dedicated to consuming apex predators. Look at this establishment called Joe's Crab Shack. They're systematically harvesting and eating creatures that are literally called killers of the sea." The footage shifted again, showing various human cooking shows. A chef demonstrated how to properly prepare grilled gator tail. Another showed the proper technique for lion-fish ceviche. A third highlighted the perfect sear on a mako shark steak. High Council member Zixtal's color shifted to a deep indigo of contemplation. "When we first discovered Earth, we thought these humans were merely another developing species. We observed their physical limitations, no natural weapons, relatively weak muscles, slow speed compared to many predators. We categorized them as prey animals who had developed basic tool use." "We were wrong," interrupted Dr. Maktal, his tentacles writhing with academic excitement despite the disturbing subject matter. "They're not prey animals who developed tools. There's something far more terrifying. They're apex predators who developed civilization." The council chamber erupted in concerned murmuring. On screen, a human child happily dipped a piece of fried shark into something called tartar sauce. "It gets worse," Dr. Maktal continued, pulling up more data streams. "They don't just eat predators, they farm them. They've created elaborate systems to breed and raise creatures that could easily kill them. Look at this facility they call a gator farm. They're literally raising swamps full of prehistoric ambush predators. For soup." Council member Vripat's crystals chimed a tone of distress. But how do they maintain dominance over such creatures? Surely these apex predators must occasionally break free and wreak havoc. Dr. Maktal's skin flickered with what might have been admiration. "Oh, they do. And when that happens, the humans just hunt them down and add them to something they call a seafood special. I've documented cases where dangerous escaped predators were recaptured and served with butter sauce within 24 Earth hours." "They're young," interjected another council member, gesturing at the screen where human children were visible. "Surely they protect their young from such dangerous food sources?" Dr. Maktal gave the equivalent of a laugh, though it came out more like a wheeze. "Protect them? They have entire marketing campaigns aimed at making predator consumption appealing to children. They shape processed shark meat into fun shapes and call them fish sticks. They serve them with colorful sauces and sweet drinks with little umbrellas." High Council member Zixtal's color had settled into a deep, worried crimson. "We need to revise all our previous assessments of human civilization, a species that casually consumes apex predators, not just as a survival necessity, but as a leisure activity, represents a level of psychological and physical dominance we hadn't previously considered possible." The footage shifted one final time, showing a human television program called Shark Week. "Look at this," Dr. Maktal said quietly. "They've turned their conquest of these ancient predators into entertainment. They study them, track them, tag them with sensors, and then they put them on their menus. They're not just killing to eat. They're systematically documenting and analyzing their prey while they consume it." "Recommendations?" Zixtal asked, his voice heavy with concern. Dr. Maktal's skin rippled with scientific precision as he delivered his report. "We should maintain our current non-interference policy. However, I strongly suggest we upgrade Earth's threat classification from developing world of interest to extreme caution, apex civilization. On what grounds? Asked Council Member Vripat. Dr. Maktal gestured at the screen, where a human was now cheerfully explaining the best wine pairings for various shark species. Any species that can look at the most efficient killing machines their planet has produced over millions of years of evolution and think, I wonder how that would taste with a nice Chardonnay, is not to be underestimated. The council voted unanimously to approve the classification change. As the members filed out of the chamber, High Council Member Zixtal remained, watching the screens with a mixture of horror and fascination. A new image had appeared. A human child's birthday party at something called an aquarium restaurant, where young humans celebrated while eating fish sandwiches and watching sharks swim in tanks behind glass. Remarkable, he muttered to himself, his skin cycling through patterns of awe and terror. They don't just eat them. They've turned their domination into a form of entertainment. They're not just predators. They're predators who have turned predation into an art form. He switched off the screens and headed for the exit, making a mental note to update the standard first contact protocols. Any species that could turn the ocean's perfect killing machine into a convenient lunch option warranted very careful handling indeed. As he left, one final image lingered on a forgotten screen, a cooking show host cheerfully demonstrating how to make kid-friendly shark tacos while wearing an apron decorated with cute cartoon sharks. In the vast tapestry of galactic civilization, humans had carved out a unique niche. They were the predators who had transcended mere predation, the hunters who had turned hunting into cuisine, and perhaps most terrifyingly of all, the only known species in the galaxy who looked at apex predators and thought, would you like fries with that? 3 solar cycles after the infamous Shark Week incident that had led to Earth's reclassification, Dr. Maktal found himself summoned back to the Galactic Research Council chamber. This time, however, he wasn't alone. A junior researcher named Pipsqueak fidgeted beside him, their bioluminescent spots pulsing with nervous energy. You have new findings? High Council Member Zixtal's voice echoed through the chamber, his tentacles now adorned with the ceremonial bands of someone who had survived multiple encounters with disturbing human documentation. Pipsqueak stepped forward, their small form trembling slightly. Honorable Council, we've discovered something even more disturbing about human predatory behavior. They don't just eat apex predators, they've started creating new ones. The chamber erupted in chaos. Council Member Vripat's crystals emanated a frequency that shattered 3 recording devices. Explain, Zixtal demanded, his chromatophores shifting to emergency crimson. Dr. Maktal activated the holographic display. They call it fusion cuisine, he said gravely. Observe. The display showed a human restaurant where a chef was proudly presenting something called a land and sea terror tower, a precarious stack of grilled shark, alligator, lionfish, and snake, all held together with something called ghost pepper sauce. They're combining multiple apex predators into single dishes, Pipsqueak explained, their voice cracking. But that's not the worst part. Show them the food challenges, Dr. Maktal. The next images caused several council members to emit their species equivalent of gagging sounds. A human establishment was advertising something called the Predator Platter Challenge. If a human could consume 5 different apex predators in under an hour, they would get their picture on what was ominously called a wall of fame. They're turning it into a competition, Dr. Maktal said quietly. They're not just eating apex predators anymore. They're competing to see who can eat the most apex predators in the shortest time. But surely this is just a small subset of their population? Council Member Vripat asked hopefully. Some kind of specialized warrior caste? Pipsqueak's bioluminescence flickered with distress. No, Council Member. We've documented instances of what they call YouTube influencers, seemingly ordinary humans with large social followings, creating what they term mukbang videos, where they consume enormous quantities of predator-based dishes while talking to their viewers. The display showed a cheerful young human woman surrounded by plates of grilled shark, fried alligator, and something called lionfish nachos, chatting animatedly about texture and flavor profiles while casually consuming enough apex predators to depopulate a small reef. There's more, Dr. Maktal added. They've started combining their predator consumption with another disturbing human practice, what they call themed entertainment. The display shifted to show something that caused several council members to emit distress pheromones. It was a restaurant designed to look like a jungle, where servers dressed as hunters delivered plates of apex predator meat, while artificial thunder boomed and mechanical animals moved in the shadows. "They've turned it into theater," Pipsqueak whispered. "They're not just eating predators, they're creating elaborate performances around the act of consuming them." High Council member Zixtal's skin had taken on a previously undocumented shade of worried mauve. Have they shown any signs of expanding their culinary interests beyond their own planet? Dr. Mektal and Pipsqueak exchanged nervous glances. "We've intercepted several research papers discussing the theoretical nutritional value of various hypothetical alien species," Dr. Mektal admitted. "There's an entire academic subfield dedicated to what they call xenogastronomy." The council chamber went deadly quiet. One human chef has already published a cookbook titled To Serve Alien. It's purely speculative, of course, but the recipe notes are disturbingly well-researched, Pipsqueak added, their bioluminescence dimming to a worried glimmer. Zixtal's tentacles curled in thought. "Recommendations? We need to establish a new classification beyond extreme caution, apex civilization," Dr. Mektal said. "I propose critical warning, culinary apex predators, and I suggest we move all first contact protocols to orbit-only communications. No face-to-face meetings until we can determine whether we resemble anything in their extensive menu database." "Seconded," squeaked Pipsqueak, who had noticed their own passing resemblance to something humans called calamari. The council voted unanimously once again, this time adding a mandate for all xenobiologists to undergo trauma counseling after viewing human cooking shows. As the chamber emptied, Dr. Mektal and Pipsqueak remained behind, watching one final piece of footage, a human child science fair project titled, "What Would Space Dragons Taste Like?" A theoretical gastronomy study. "Should we tell them about the Krexthulian Empire?" Pipsqueak asked quietly, referring to the fearsome warrior race in the adjacent galaxy. Dr. Mektal's skin rippled with dark humor. "You mean the ones who model themselves after what humans call lobsters?" "No, I think we'll keep that to ourselves. Let them figure that out on their own." They switched off the display, but not before catching a glimpse of a new trending human cooking show, Extinct Ive Cuisine, recreating prehistoric apex predators through modern molecular gastronomy. As they left the chamber, both researchers couldn't help but wonder, in the great cosmic food chain, had humanity somehow managed to place itself not just at the top, but in an entirely new category? They weren't just apex predators. They were apex predators with recipe books, cooking shows, and a disturbing tendency to look at the universe's most dangerous creatures and ask, yes, but how would that taste with mango salsa? The answer, as the galaxy was slowly learning, was probably delicious, and that was perhaps the most terrifying thing of all. The emergency meeting of the Galactic Research Council was called at what humans would consider 3 a.m. Galactic Standard Time. Dr. Mektal and Pipsqueak arrived to find the chamber in chaos, with council members' biological displays creating a disturbing light show of panic-induced bioluminescence. "They've done it," High Council member Zixtal's voice cut through the cacophony, his tentacles twisted into what the council's physician had recently diagnosed as human-induced stress knots. "Done what?" Pipsqueak asked, then immediately regretted the question as the main display activated. The footage showed a human television program called Next Level Gastronomy. A celebrity chef stood proudly next to what appeared to be a massive aquarium filled with genetically modified sharks. The creatures had been engineered to be twice as large as their natural counterparts, with enhanced muscle density that the chef enthusiastically described as creating the perfect meat-to-fat ratio. "They're designing their own apex predators," Dr. Mektal whispered, his chromatophores pulsing with a mixture of horror and reluctant admiration. "They've moved beyond simply eating what nature provided. They're now creating custom predators specifically for consumption." Council member Vripat's crystals emitted a high-pitched keen of distress. The database shows they're calling it Project Megalodon Revival, the future of sustainable seafood. Sustainable? Pipsqueak's voice cracked. They're creating prehistoric murder monsters and calling it sustainable. The display shifted to show various research facilities where humans in lab coats were cheerfully splicing genes to create what they termed culinarily optimized predator species. One facility was working on temperature-resistant crocodiles that could survive in colder climates, explicitly to expand the market for gator meat into northern regions. "There's more," Zixtal said gravely. "Show them the space program footage." The next images caused Dr. Mactalto amid an involuntary ink cloud of shock. A human space agency was presenting plans for what they called deep space aquaculture, orbital facilities designed to breed and raise modified apex predators in zero gravity. They're claiming that space-raised predator meat has superior texture due to the effects of microgravity on muscle development, Vripat explained, her crystals vibrating with anxiety. They're planning to launch the first orbital shark farm next year. "But why?" Pipsqueak demanded. "They already have access to perfectly terrifying natural predators. Why create more?" A new council member, whose name roughly translated to "perpetually worried about humans," stepped forward. "We've intercepted discussions about something they call artisanal predator cuisine. Apparently, some humans consider natural apex predators too common." The display showed footage from a high-end human restaurant where a chef was presenting something called Zero-G Tiger Shark Sashimi with Lunar Basil to a table of enthusiastic diners. The menu proudly proclaimed that all their predator meat was ethically sourced from free-range orbital habitats. "They've even started a certification program," Dr. Mactal noted, pulling up additional data. "Look, certified space-raised apex predator. They're creating quality standards for orbital monster meat." The council chamber erupted in another wave of panic as the next images appeared. Architectural plans for what humans were calling the Jurassic Larder, a massive facility designed to house and raise genetically reconstructed prehistoric predators, specifically for high-end restaurants. "They're not just bringing back extinct apex predators," Zixtal said, his color shifting to a previously undocumented shade of existential dread. "They're bringing them back with what they call culinary improvements." The plans showed modified versions of ancient predators, each carefully engineered to be more delicious than their original counterparts. Notes in the margins included phrases like enhanced marbling in the Tyrannosaurus rump and tenderized velociraptor flanks. "Have they shown any signs of?" Vripat paused, her crystals dimming with dread. "Expanding these programs beyond Earth species?" Pipsqueak reluctantly activated their personal datapad. "There's a new research initiative called Xenogastronomic Engineering. They're hypothesizing about the potential culinary applications of genetically modified alien species." One paper is titled, "Theoretical Approaches to Improving the Mouthfeel of Extraterrestrial Apex Predator Meat." The chamber fell into horrified silence. "I propose a new classification," Dr. Mactal said finally. "Beyond critical warning, I suggest extreme hazard culinary singularity achieved." "On what grounds?" asked the perpetually worried about humans council member. "They've transcended merely eating apex predators," Dr. Mactal explained. "They're now actively engineering the evolution of predator species to make them more delicious. They're not just dominant over nature, they're redesigning it to suit their palates." The council voted to approve the new classification, adding a requirement that all galactic civilization defense protocols be updated to include sections on resistance to being considered appetizing. As the chamber emptied, Dr. Mactal, Pipsqueak, and Zixtal remained, watching one final piece of footage. A cooking show host explaining how to properly season and grill lab-grown megalodon steaks while standing in a zero-gravity kitchen aboard humanity's first orbital predator farm. "Should we tell them about the VZX Thor?" Pipsqueak asked quietly, referring to a newly discovered species of space-dwelling predators in the Carina Nebula. "Absolutely not," Dr. Mactal and Zixtal said in unison, both imagining the inevitable human response. "Yes, but would it pair better with red or white wine?" As they left the chamber, their worried discussion was interrupted by an alert on their datapads. Humanity had just announced plans for something called Interstellar Iron Chef, a cooking competition show specifically focused on exploring the culinary potential of apex predators from across the galaxy. In the vast tapestry of space-time, humanity had carved out a unique niche, They weren't just eating apex predators anymore. They were designing them, raising them in space, and turning the very concept of predation into a form of culinary art. And perhaps most terrifyingly of all, they were looking at the stars not with fear of what might be hunting them, but with curiosity about what new flavors might be waiting to be discovered. The galaxy, it seemed, had better start developing a taste for human cuisine. Before human cuisine developed a taste for the galaxy, the Galactic Research Council's emergency bunker had never been used before. Located deep within an asteroid in a classified star system, it was designed for civilization-threatening events like supernovas, black hole anomalies, or particularly aggressive spam calls about extended warranty protection. Today, it was hosting its first meeting. "It's worse than we thought," Dr. Maktal announced to the assembled council members, who had traded their usual ceremonial robes for protective suits designed to prevent what humans called mouth-watering aromas. "Worse than orbital shark farms?" Council member Vripat's crystals clinked skeptically. "Worse than genetically modified megalodons?" "Worse," Pipsqueak confirmed, their bioluminescence dimmed to stealth levels. "They've developed fusion restaurants." High Council member Zixtal's tentacles coiled in confusion. "You mean atomic fusion? They're splitting atoms to cook their predators now?" "No," Dr. Maktal said grimly. "They're fusing different culinary traditions. Show them the footage." The bunker's secure display activated, showing a trendy human establishment called Apex Fusion. A chef was cheerfully explaining their signature dish, sushi-style space shark tacos with molecular gastronomy foam and prehistoric pepper sauce. "They're combining multiple culinary traditions," Pipsqueak explained, voice trembling. "Taking different cultures' approaches to preparing apex predators and mixing them together." The footage continued, showing a parade of dishes that caused several council members to emit involuntary defense mechanisms. There was Indo-Italian crocodile curry pasta, French-Korean fusion megalodon tartare, and something particularly disturbing called Tex-Mex Thai orbital sashimi predator platter. "But that's not the worst part," Dr. Maktal said. "Show them the social media trend." The display shifted to show something called TikTok, where humans were participating in what they called the #ApexFusion Challenge. Young humans were competing to create the most outlandish combinations of predator-based dishes, each more elaborate than the last. Yesterday, a human influencer received 60 million views for combining space-raised shark meat with something called breakfast cereal, Pipsqueak reported, their spots pulsing with distress. They called it Predator Pops and suggested serving it to children. Children? Vripat's crystals emitted a frequency that cracked 3 emergency backup screens. They're training their young to be even more culinarily adventurous? "It gets worse," Dr. Maktal said, a phrase that had become his unofficial motto. "Show them the education initiative." The next footage showed a human school where young children were participating in what was called Future Foods class. A teacher was enthusiastically explaining the concept of sustainable apex predator cuisine, while students designed their own hypothetical genetically modified predator species for what they called optimal flavor profiles. This one child, Pipsqueak said, pulling up a specific file, designed something she called a cuddly carnivore, a genetically modified predator specifically engineered to be both adorable and delicious. She got an A+ and a grant from 3 different culinary institutes. The council chamber erupted in panic, until Zixtal managed to restore order by releasing calming pheromones through the ventilation system. But surely they must be reaching their limit. The perpetually worried Abouthumans council member asked hopefully. How much further can they take this? Dr. Maktal and Pipsqueak exchanged glances before activating the final piece of footage. It showed a human television program called Next Generation Nutrition, where scientists were discussing something called the Predator Paradox Project. They're working on a way to genetically modify humans to better digest and enjoy an even wider variety of apex predator meat, Dr. Maktal explained. They're not just modifying their food anymore. They're modifying themselves to be better at eating it. One researcher, Pipsqueak added, was quoted as saying, "Why should we limit ourselves to Earth-based predator cuisine? The galaxy is full of potentially delicious apex species. We just need to upgrade our digestive capabilities to enjoy them all." The bunker fell into horrified silence. I propose a new classification, Zixtal said finally. Beyond extreme hazard. I suggest reality-altering threat, culinary transcendence achieved. On what grounds? Several council members asked simultaneously. They're not just eating predators anymore, Zixtal explained, his chromatophores shifting through patterns that would give a kaleidoscope an identity crisis. They're not just engineering them, or raising them in space, or combining their culinary traditions. They're actively working to evolve themselves into beings capable of consuming any apex predator in the universe. They're pursuing species-wide adaptation for the sake of their taste buds. The council voted unanimously to approve the new classification, adding a requirement that all member species begin research into making themselves appear culinarily unappealing as a matter of galactic security. As the bunker slowly emptied, Dr. Mactal, Pipsqueak, and Zixtal remained behind, watching one final piece of footage, a cooking show pilot called Universal Cuisine, making the galaxy delicious, one apex predator at a time. Should we warn the Draxolotls? Pipsqueak asked quietly, referring to a species of hypercarnivorous space dragons recently discovered in the Horsehead Nebula. The seven-headed ones that breathe plasma fire? Dr. Mactal asked. Yes, absolutely not, Zixtal interjected. I just intercepted a human food blog post theorizing about whether plasma breath would naturally tenderize the meat, and whether 7 heads meant 7 different flavor profiles. As they left the bunker, their datapads pinged with a new alert. Humanity had just announced plans for a project called Gastrogenesis, a massive space station dedicated to creating what they called the ultimate fusion of all possible culinary traditions, terrestrial and extraterrestrial. In the grand buffet of cosmic existence, humanity had apparently decided that everything was on the menu. They weren't just apex predators anymore, they were apex consumers, actively redesigning both themselves and the universe to achieve what they called peak culinary potential. And as the galaxy was learning, when humans said peak culinary potential, what they really meant was everything is potentially delicious if you're brave enough to try it. The stars themselves seemed to dim slightly, as if trying to make themselves look less appetizing. In the great cosmic restaurant, it seemed, humanity had just appointed themselves both the chef and the food critics, and they were very, very hungry for new experiences. The Galactic Research Council's Quantum Encrypted Emergency Channel had never been activated before. It was designed for catastrophic events that threatened the very fabric of galactic society, like the discovery of a civilization-ending asteroid, the emergence of a hostile universe-consuming entity, or someone posting spoilers for popular entertainment programs. Today, it was blinking red. We have a situation, Dr. Mactal announced to the holographic projections of council members, each broadcasting from their own secure bunkers across the galaxy. His chromatophores were cycling through colors so rapidly that the AI transcription system had crashed trying to document them all. Worse than their self-modification programs? Asked Vripat's crystalline projection, flickering with anxiety. Worse than their fusion restaurants? Worse, Pipsqueak confirmed, their bioluminescence now equipped with military-grade dampeners. The humans. They've made contact. The collective gasp of the council created a feedback loop that temporarily disrupted subspace communications across 3 sectors. Contact? High Council member Zixtal's hologram tentacles twisted into shapes that violated several laws of geometry. With whom? The Krexthulian Empire, Dr. Mactal said grimly. The warrior race we specifically didn't tell them about, the ones who resemble what humans call lobsters, Pipsqueak finished, their voice barely a whisper. The emergency channel erupted with panic transmissions until Zixtal managed to restore order by threatening to activate everyone's meditation apps simultaneously. Show us the footage, he commanded. The secure holographic display activated, showing the first diplomatic meeting between humans and the Krexthulians. The massive armored warriors of the Empire had arrived in their most intimidating ceremonial battle suits, bristling with weapons and decorated with the trophies of conquered species. The humans had greeted them with a banquet table. Is tat. Vripat's crystals chimed in horror. Drawn butter and lemon wedges, Pipsqueak confirmed miserably. They even provided what they call fancy claw crackers. The footage showed the Krex Thulian Supreme Commander, resplendent in armor forged from meteor iron, being presented with something called a surf and turf special, a combination of space-raised shark and orbital-bred predator beef, served with what the humans cheerfully described as inspired by your magnificent appearance sides. But surely the Krex Thulians were offended? The perpetually worried Abouthumans council member's hologram asked hopefully. Surely they recognized this as an insult to their warrior culture? Dr. Maktal's skin rippled with dark amusement. That's the worst part. Show them what happened next. The footage continued. The Krex Thulian Supreme Commander had sampled the human dishes, their compound eyes widening with what appeared to be delight. Within minutes, the entire diplomatic party was enthusiastically consuming what humans called their distant cosmic cousins, while asking detailed questions about cooking techniques. They've scheduled what they're calling a cultural exchange program, Pipsqueak reported, pulling up additional data. The Krex Thulians are sending their warrior chiefs to learn human culinary arts, and the humans are sending their chef instructors to teach something they're calling advanced crustacean cuisine at the Imperial Academy. But that's not even the worst part, Dr. Maktal added, a phrase that had become so common it was being considered for his official title. Show them the collaboration project. The next images showed plans for something called the Interstellar Culinary Combat Academy, a joint venture between human cooking schools and Krex Thulian warrior training facilities. The curriculum included courses like warrior chef fusion techniques, battle-ready broiling, and tactical flavor deployment. They're combining their martial traditions with human cooking techniques, Zixtal observed, his color shifting to a shade officially classified as existential panic beige. The Krex Thulians are integrating human culinary philosophy into their warrior culture. It gets worse, Pipsqueak said. The humans introduced them to something called competitive eating. The footage shifted to show a Krex Thulian battle arena that had been converted into what humans called a food festival stadium. Warriors in full battle regalia were competing to consume enormous quantities of fusion cuisine, while human judges provided enthusiastic commentary. The Supreme Commander has already issued a decree, Dr. Maktal reported. All Krex Thulian warriors are now required to complete what they're calling culinary combat training. They've decided that mastery of eating apex predators is the ultimate expression of warrior dominance. But surely this alliance can't spread, someone asked desperately. Pipsqueak reluctantly activated their datapad. 3 other warrior species have already requested diplomatic meetings with humanity, specifically requesting what they call the full culinary experience. One of them is the Vizx-Thor, the space-dwelling predators we've been trying to keep secret. And the humans' response? Zixtal asked, dreading the answer. They've already started designing specialized spacesuits equipped with what they call interstellar feeding apparatus to facilitate fine dining in zero gravity. Their chief xenogastronomist was quoted as saying, "Every apex predator in the universe deserves to be paired with the perfect wine." The council chamber fell into a silence so profound it briefly created a quantum anomaly. "I propose a new classification," Zixtal said finally. "Beyond reality-altering threat. I suggest paradigm extinction event, culinary diplomatic singularity achieved." On what grounds? They're not just eating apex predators anymore, Zixtal explained, his tentacles gesturing in patterns that would give a theoretical physicist a headache. They're not just engineering them or raising them in space or modifying themselves to eat them better. They're now using their culinary dominance as a form of diplomatic outreach. They're converting warrior species into foodie cultures. They're turning the galaxy's most feared predators into restaurant critics. The council voted unanimously to approve the new classification, adding a requirement that all member species begin research into what humans called comfort food as a matter of galactic security. As the emergency channel slowly shut down, Dr. Maktal, Pipsqueak, and Zixtal remained online, watching one final piece of footage. The announcement of a new human Krex Thulian television network called Warrior's Kitchen, featuring battle-hardened warriors competing to create the perfect fusion dishes while wearing full combat armor. "Should we warn the Draxolotls now?" Pipsqueak asked quietly. "The 7-headed plasma-breathing space dragons?" Dr. Maktal asked. "Too late. I just intercepted a human Krexthulian collaborative research paper titled Plasma-Seared Space Dragon, a Revolutionary Approach to High-Temperature Cuisine. As they logged off, their datapads pinged with a new alert. Humanity and the Krexthulian Empire had just announced plans for something called the Grand Galactic Gastronomy Games, an Olympic-style event combining culinary arts with martial combat, open to all species who dare to prove themselves in the ultimate test of warrior chef supremacy. In the vast cosmic cafeteria, humanity had apparently appointed themselves the lunch ladies of the universe. They weren't just apex predators anymore, they were apex socializers, turning the very concept of predation into a form of interstellar cultural exchange. And as the galaxy was learning, when humans said cultural exchange, what they really meant was everyone's invited to dinner, one way or another. The stars themselves seemed to flicker nervously, as if practicing their dinner party small talk. In the great cosmic kitchen, humanity had just appointed themselves the head chefs, and they were very, very eager to share their recipes with everyone, even if everyone happened to look delicious. The Galactic Research Council's ultra-secure temporal panic room existed in a state of quantum uncertainty, simultaneously there and not there, designed to be used only in events that threatened the very timeline of the universe itself. Its existence was so secret that even the architects who built it had their memories quantum scrambled to forget its specifications. Today, it had materialized into definite existence. The situation has evolved beyond our worst projections, Dr. Maktal announced to the assembled council members, each of whom had been required to pass through 7 layers of security and a surprise pop quiz about their favorite comfort foods to gain entry. Worse than the Culinary Combat Academy? Vripat's crystals vibrated with dread. Worse than the Krexthulian fusion cuisine revolution? Much worse, Pipsqueak confirmed, their bioluminescence now equipped with quantum encryption. The humans have discovered time travel cuisine. The temporal panic room briefly phased out of reality from the collective gasp of horror. Show them, High Council member Zixtal commanded, his tentacles twisted into shapes that made theoretical mathematicians weep. The quantum holographic display activated, showing footage from something humans called Temporal Taste, the ultimate Food Network show. A team of chef scientists was using experimental technology to retrieve extinct apex predators from various time periods, specifically for culinary purposes. They're calling it pan-temporal fusion cuisine, Dr. Maktal explained, his chromatophores displaying colors that hadn't existed before this moment. They're combining apex predators from different eras of Earth's history. The footage showed a restaurant called Epochs and Appetites where diners could order dishes like Triassic-Jurassic fusion tartare and Cretaceous quaternary tasting menu. A chef was enthusiastically explaining how they had combined meat from a freshly retrieved Tyrannosaurus rex with their space-erased megalodon to create something called surf and turf through time. But that's not the worst part, Pipsqueak added, their voice barely registering on normal frequencies. Show them the Temporal Fusion Project. The next images showed a massive facility called the Chronological Culinary Institute. Scientists in chefs' hats were using advanced technology to create what they termed time-stable fusion predators, creatures that combined the most culinarily desirable traits of apex predators from multiple time periods. They've created something they call a chrono shark, Dr. Maktal reported, pulling up the specifics. It has the size of a megalodon, the hunting efficiency of a great white, and what they describe as perfectly marbled meat due to temporal genetic engineering. The Krexthulians' response? Zixtal asked, dreading the answer. They've fully embraced it, Pipsqueak said miserably. They've launched their own temporal research division called Warriors Through Time. They're retrieving their own ancient warrior ancestors to participate in something called cross-temporal cooking battles. The footage shifted to show a massive arena where Krexthulian warriors from different eras were competing in what was advertised as the ultimate time-spanning food fight. Ancient warrior chiefs in primitive battle gear were learning modern fusion cuisine techniques, while their descendants taught them about molecular gastronomy. But surely there are temporal laws against this? The perpetually worry about humans council member asked desperately. That's the thing. Dr. Maktal said. The humans have somehow convinced the Temporal Protection Authority that culinary preservation is a valid reason for temporal manipulation. They're calling it gastronomic heritage conservation. The display showed a new human-led initiative called Taste of Time, a project dedicated to preserving and documenting the flavors of apex predators throughout history. They had even started a temporal food museum, where visitors could sample authentically preserved prehistoric cuisine. And now, Pipsqueak added, they've started combining their temporal culinary technology with their space program. The final footage showed plans for something called a pan-dimensional gastronome, a space station that existed partially out of time, designed to house and raise apex predators from all eras while developing new temporal fusion recipes. They're not just mixing Earth predators anymore, Dr. Maktal explained. They're starting to look at extinct apex predators from other planets. They've already requested permission to retrieve something called a hyperphage from the extinct ecology of Alpha Centauri III. The temporal panic room's quantum structure briefly destabilized from the collective horror. I propose a new classification, Zixtal said, his color shifting to a shade that existed in negative time, beyond paradigm extinction event. I suggest timeline-shattering crisis, pan-temporal culinary ascension. On what grounds? They're not just eating apex predators anymore, Zixtal explained, his tentacles moving in patterns that violated causality. They're not just engineering them or raising them in space or turning warrior races into foodies. They're now actively manipulating time itself to expand their menu options. They're treating the entire timeline as one giant buffet. The council voted unanimously to approve the new classification, adding a requirement that all member species begin research into temporal taste masking technology as a matter of trans-temporal security. As the temporal panic room prepared to phase back into quantum uncertainty, Dr. Maktal, Pipsqueak, and Zixtal remained, watching one final piece of footage, the announcement of a new show called Cooking Through Cosmos and Chronology, featuring chefs from multiple time periods and planets competing to create the ultimate trans-temporal, multi-species fusion cuisine. Should we warn anyone? Pipsqueak asked quietly. Too late, Dr. Maktal replied. I just intercepted plans for something called the Ultimate Predator Preservation Project. They're creating a temporal zoo or restaurant where every apex predator that ever existed or will exist can be both observed and served with appropriate wine pairings. As they prepared to leave the temporal panic room, their quantum encrypted data pads pinged with a new alert. Humanity had just announced plans for the Infinite Buffet, a restaurant chain that would exist simultaneously across all time periods and spatial dimensions, promising to serve every apex predator that was, is, or will be, prepared in every style that was, is, or will be invented. In the vast cosmic temporal cafeteria, humanity had apparently appointed themselves the trans-dimensional lunch ladies of the multiverse. They weren't just apex predators anymore. They were temporal tastemakers, turning the very concept of time into an endless smorgasbord of predatory possibilities. And as the galaxy was learning, when humans said time for dinner, they meant all of time was for dinner. The stars themselves seemed to twinkle anxiously across multiple timelines, as if practicing their table manners in every possible temporal variation. In the great cosmic temporal kitchen, humanity had just appointed themselves the head chefs of all existence, past, present, and future. Even the laws of causality were starting to look oddly appetizing. The Galactic Research Council's ultimate emergency contingency facility wasn't just a room, it was an entire pocket universe, created specifically for scenarios that transcended mere temporal or spatial crises. Its existence was so classified that even thinking about it required special security clearance. Today, it had manifested itself out of pure necessity. They've done it, Dr. Maktal announced to the assembled council members, each of whom had been quantum teleported here, in the middle of their various panic attacks. His chromatophores had evolved sentience, and were currently writing their own research papers about human culinary evolution. Done what? Vripat's crystals asked, though they were already cracking from anticipatory stress. The humans have achieved total culinary convergence, Pipsqueak whispered, their bioluminescence now sophisticated enough to have its own cooking show. High Council member Zixtal's tentacles tied themselves into knots that created several new branches of mathematics. Show us. The omnidimensional display activated, showing what the humans had created. The infinite cosmic culinary nexus, a massive structure that existed simultaneously across all points in space and time, combining every culinary tradition that ever was or would be. They've linked all their achievements together, Dr. Maktal explained, his voice trembling. The space-raised apex predators, the temporal retrievals, the fusion cuisines, the diplomatic gastronomy programs, they've combined everything into one grand, unified theory of eating stuff that could eat you. The footage showed the impossible structure in action. In one section, temporally retrieved tyrannosaurs were being raised alongside space-engineered megalodons in zero-gravity habitats. In another, Krexthulian warrior chefs from 12 different timelines were teaching ancient Earth chefs how to properly prepare fusion dishes using ingredients that wouldn't exist for another million years. But that's not even the worst part, Pipsqueak added, a phrase that had become so common it had developed its own gravitational field. Show them. The menu. The display shifted to show what humans were calling the Omniversal Tasting Experience, a dining program that linked every restaurant across space and time into one interconnected culinary network. Diners could order dishes that combined ingredients from multiple time periods, prepared using techniques from different alien civilizations, served in environments that defied physics for optimal flavor enhancement. They've created something they call the Ultimate Apex Experience, Dr. Maktal reported, pulling up the specifics. It's a 15-course meal that includes predators from every major extinction event, prepared using cooking techniques that haven't been invented yet, served by chefs who don't technically exist in our timeline. The Krexthulians' response? Zixtal asked, though he already knew the answer would redefine several fundamental constants of the universe. They've fully integrated their entire warrior culture into it, Pipsqueak confirmed. They've declared that the highest form of combat is creating the perfect fusion dish using ingredients from at least 3 temporal periods and 2 spatial dimensions. The footage showed the latest development, a cross-temporal cooking competition where teams of humans and various alien species competed to create dishes that existed in quantum superposition simultaneously, incorporating every possible preparation method until the moment of consumption. They're calling it Schrödinger's snack, Dr. Maktal explained. Each dish exists in all possible states of deliciousness until someone takes a bite. But before anyone could respond, the Pocket Universe's warning system activated. Something was happening. Something unprecedented. The display showed a new arrival at the infinite cosmic culinary nexus. The Draxolotls, the 7-headed plasma-breathing space dragons, had finally made contact. Their massive form approached the human diplomatic team, all 14 eyes blazing with cosmic fire. The council watched in horror, expecting devastation. Instead, the Draxolotl's primary head spoke. "We heard you have excellent fire-grilled options." The human's response was immediate. "Oh, you should try our new temporal spatial fusion grill. The heat comes from 3 different time periods simultaneously. Plus, we've incorporated your plasma breath technology into our latest marinade application systems." The security footage showed what happened next. The Draxolotls were enthusiastically sampling dishes, while offering suggestions about optimal plasma temperatures for various cuts of meat. Their 7 heads were each trying different temporal variations of the same dish, comparing notes about flavor profiles across multiple timelines. "I propose a final classification," Zixtal said, his color shifting to a shade that existed only in theoretical physics. "Beyond all previous categories, I suggest absolute culinary singularity, peak evolution achieved. On what grounds?" "They've done it," he explained, his tentacles gesturing in patterns that created several new dimensions. "They've turned the entire concept of predation into a form of universal cultural exchange. They've united space, time, and multiple species through the power of incredibly ambitious snacking." The council voted unanimously to approve the new classification, adding a final note. "If you can't beat them, make dinner reservations." As the Pocket Universe prepared to return them to regular space-time, Dr. Maktal, Pipsqueak, and Zixtal watched one final scene. Humans and Draxolotls collaborating on a new project called 7 Heads Are Better Than One, a guide to multi-dimensional taste testing. Should we be worried? Pipsqueak asked quietly. Actually, Dr. Mactal replied, checking his quantum-encrypted dinner reservation app. I managed to get a table at the Infinite Cosmic Culinary Nexus next week. Apparently, they're unveiling something called Big Bang Bouillon Soup, made from ingredients that existed before the formation of matter as we know it. Save me a seat, Zixtal said, his tentacles finally unknotting themselves. I hear their heat death of the universe hotpot is to die for. Literally, it exists at the very end of time. As they prepared to return to normal space-time, their omnidimensional datapads pinged with one final alert. Humanity had just announced their next project, the restaurant at the beginning, middle, and end of everything, promising to serve every possible food, in every possible way, at every possible when. In the infinite expanse of existence, humanity had finally achieved its ultimate form, not just apex predators, not just cosmic chefs, but the ultimate culinary unifying force of the universe. They had transformed the very fabric of reality into one enormous, endlessly diverse, impossibly delicious dining experience. And as the cosmos itself settled in for dinner, even the laws of physics had to admit, the service was excellent, the menu was literally infinite, and somehow, somewhere, in some timeline, there was always room for dessert. After all, when humans said universal cuisine, they meant universal. The stars themselves twinkled with anticipation, like an endless array of cosmic dinner bells. In the great restaurant of existence, humanity had finally created the ultimate fusion, a perfect blend of ambition, appetite, and absolute culinary audacity, and every species in every timeline had to agree. The reservations might be impossible to get, but the food? Out of this world, and every other world, and every possible world that ever was, is, or would be. Bon appetit, Cosmos.